Hi, everybody. I am David Neely, music director and principal conductor of Des Moines Metro Opera. I'm coming to you live from my piano corner in my house in Hyattsville, Maryland. I'm here to talk to you today about the great French grand opera masterpiece, Manon. And since it is a French grand opera, I thought I would take the opportunity for the first time in months to dress a little bit fancy. I'm sure most of you out there can relate to that. I wish we were in Iowa right now. I miss everybody, and we would be in dress rehearsal week, about to open the season live. We can't do that, of course, this year, but we have some very nice things in store for you. You know, those of us in the performing arts, we miss making music with our fellow musicians, and we very much miss our audience. And I think we don't take enough opportunities to tell our audiences how important they are to the performing process. The Blank Performing Arts Center in Indianola is the best interactive performing venue that I know of. I don't know any other place, and I know all of the artists who come and join us in the summers experience the same thing. Your energy, generous attention, are an integral part of the performances we make, and they inspire us, and it's very, very thrilling. So thank you for that, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to that someday. Let's all look forward to that day. So French Grand Opera, what is that? Well, there will be a couple of presentations coming up this week that I'll tell you about in a little bit, I'll get into that in a moment. Actually, I just want to say one more thing. The virtual festival is very important. Our virtual festival is coming to you due to the thriving relationship, for which we're very grateful, that we have with Iowa PBS. We have been fortunate to have Iowa PBS record one of our productions every summer festival season for the past 6 years. And they've been broadcast within the state of Iowa on the airwaves and cable, but for the first time ever, they will be available online for streaming starting this Sunday with the Emmy Award-winning Manon broadcast at 2 p.m. Central Time. You can join us for a live watch party. If you can't watch it then, or if your friends can't watch it then, they will be able to watch it for the following 45 days, and that will be the case with all of the subsequent performances that we stream. You can watch them on Facebook, YouTube, iowapbs.org, or any of your local PBS station websites. You'll be able to find the links to that on those. And all the information for the virtual festival is available on the Des Moines Metro Opera.org website. So Manon, French Grand Opera, 5 acts, very large form, interpolated ballet because the audience needed it, drinking scenes with choruses, large choruses, virtuosic roles, usually showcasing a leading character, normally the soprano. An invention of the 19th century. But to start off, I'm going to play you something that is not of the 19th century and not by Massenet. That is an excerpt from François Couperin, the great Baroque master, a piece that he wrote for harpsichord called La Mimi, or Mimi. I think we can tell from this that due to the many ornaments and the stately rhythm, that Mimi was fancy, but not too exuberant. Pretty classy, pretty smart. You know, it's amazing. Music can tell lots of stories with just sound. And if you add the words that come along in opera, then you have a really interesting evening ahead for you. So Massenet, he sits down to write an opera set in the early 18th century as a composer in the 1880s. What do? Well, Massenet is a genius at creating a different language for each opera that he writes. Different sound according to the setting, according to the story. Werther does not sound like Cendrillon, which does not sound like Thais, which does not sound like Don Quixote, for example. And yet they all fall under the style of Massenet. Well, I can imagine him knowing his Couperin very well as a student at the Paris Conservatoire and as a professional, and possibly playing just that piece called Mimi, and thinking, I can work some of the style into Manon. And in fact, he takes a few opportunities in the score to directly quote styles of that time. And I'm going to play a couple for you right now. One of them is a minuet, which is actually being danced on stage while two of the main characters are talking over it. That's called melodrama. And it almost, if I played a few more ornaments that are there, you might think it is actually Baroque. That's very elegant. Well, that's no surprise. Massenet is an extremely elegant composer. We also have a song later on in the opera sung by Manon's cousin, who he's not very responsible, and he's about to go gambling, but first he's going to flirt with the girls and see if one of them can hang with him and bring him luck. So he sings in a sarabande style. He sings with forced rhyme. It's deliberately antiquated sounding, almost Renaissance sounding, what he's singing, in fact. And then it's followed by a lively gavotte, which is the same gavotte that begins the overture. So. And here's the gavotte. Not everything in Manon is Baroque, but there are numerous other instances. Plus, in general, the score of Manon is a little more transparent than some of the other operas that I mentioned earlier, with the exception of a few scenes that are really quite verismo in style. I want to show you a piece of sheet music, an excerpt from the vocal score of Manon's first aria. It's going to come up on your screens, and I want you to pay attention. Well, if you see, I highlighted in red a lot of markings on there. I'm about to tell you about that. Massenet not only wrote music that told the story, but he also was interested in giving the performers clear guidance in what levels of interpretation there were. So there's a lot of nuance. You see a lot of dynamics, and you see a lot of soft dynamics for the singers, which means don't shout. You must be heard in an operatic setting, but don't shout. It's subtle. There are reasons for that. There's a rallentando. You see there are little lines over the notes. Those are tenuti, and that means to lean on those a little bit. Sometimes it means hold the notes. And this, in Massenet's case, in all of his operas, it tends to mean to lean a little bit. And so Manon is coming out here, like in any great opera, the title character comes out a little bit later. We have some exposition, we have to meet some other characters, and also we have to have some anticipation built before she enters. If she comes in, she's young, right? She's 15. She is, according to her family, too exuberant and is therefore being sent off to a convent, poor thing. And she is at a way station in a city, and she's supposed to get to another coach to go to the convent, and her cousin is supposed to meet her there. And unfortunately, he's a bit of a bon vivant. He's a soldier. He acts like he's supposed to be responsible, but he isn't really very responsible. But we'll get to that in a moment. Manon is a little bit intoxicated. She's off kilter. She's a little stupefied, a little dizzy. You know, if you think about the kind of dance that would express intoxication and dizziness, the perfect one is a waltz. And Massenet has buried a waltz in here very subtly. We don't notice it right away because it's slow. and it's a little bit off kilter. So you get downbeats in the orchestra and Manon leaning on strange offbeats. So I'll play it without singing right now. And we stretch. She does it again. And that appoggiatura there says something about Manon too. Already we know she's kind of connected to things. She's smart, she's sensual. And now she kind of says, ah, cousin, cousin. Oh, I'm so sorry that I'm so full of emotion right now. And it gets very soft and slows down. And then she says it again. Je suis encore tout dire. And then she chatters. There's a youthful gesture here. Just, oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking so fast. It's my first trip. It's very cute. We immediately find her sympathetic and are interested in her. Unfortunately, there is he's the Minister of Finance, and he sees Manon and notices she's very beautiful and asks her if she wants to accompany him in her coach. And Manon's very innocent, and she starts to, but he doesn't do a very good job of it. In fact, Massenet doesn't even give him any music. He gives him underlying chords in the orchestra, and he speaks over them. It's not very sophisticated. And Manon's kind of scared away. Well, cousin comes back and says, hey, look, don't talk to men. Listen, I got to go have a drink with my friends, but you stay here and don't talk to anybody. Not exactly responsible. But so his character, he's a soldier, so we got to march. It's a little march for a while. And then when he tells her, don't do anything rash, I'll be right back, and I'm the one who guards the honor of the family, we get another gavotte. Ne branchez pas, soyez gentil, be nice, be brave, be good, and don't forget, oh my dear, that I am the guardian of your honor. Excuse my paraphrasing of the French, but I'm trying to get my point across. And also notice something Massenet does really cleverly here. When he says, I'm the guardian of your honor, he writes mock, very serious music. We have things called suspension. It's a chain of suspension sounds like this. It's when we have a dissonance and a resolve, and it goes down the stair step. It's like 2 feet going down the stairs one after another. And it's usually reserved for church music of the time of the Baroque period. And so it's basically a signal to us that he's not really everything he says he is. All right, so poor Manon says, oh, darn, and she has a moment of self-pity, and we get a sarabande, which is a slow, stately Baroque dance, and she says, oh, see, Manon, oh, it's all a dream. If I had a couple of trills in this next phrase, it might also almost be couperin. Listen. That was the couperin version of Massenet. And then she sings it one more time. Oh, Manon. Thus ends the story of Manon. Let's go. Remember that phrase because you're going to hear it again. So, a handsome student walks on stage. He's also a little bit lost, and we hear this. And already we know, okay, this is an important person because the music is so attractive and so honest. It tells us this is a character, a bit of a dreamer, a romantic. And in fact, we have this repeated thing. The cellos here is very dashing too. And then it calms down, and then he hesitates a little bit. So we also know that maybe he's not that confident. He's definitely not the cousin. All right. Well, he turns around and sees Manon, and the orchestra tells us this, and they speak over it. He comes over and introduces himself. It sounds like perfume. It's so tender and lovely. You know, this is a hallmark of Massenet and French music going all the way back to the Baroque. There's a sensuality and harmony in French music frequently. You don't get chords like that in Germanic music as much in the period, or just the give and take, you know, the lingering tenutos on this, those markings. Yeah. It's very beautiful. Well, they decide to run off together, and we get, and I'll use this word again, exuberant duet, where they have a meeting of souls and they run off and they're going to live together. Well, they run to Paris and have found a home in a small apartment, barely furnished. Father, oh, I never told you, the student, this is the son of the Count de Grieux. He's a nobleman, and Father de Grieux is not happy that his son is not in college where he's supposed to be and is with a young woman and not married. So he has decided to write his father and say, I'm going to marry Manon. And he tells Manon about this. And Manon is a little bit distant. We see her not being excited and jumping up and down about this. We don't quite know why. Well, de Grieux goes to the post office to mail the letter, and Manon's cousin shows up with her friend, the Count of Bretigny. And her friend is interested in Manon and makes an offer to Manon. Well, you know, you could come with me. I will offer you riches and everything you could dream of. And Manon, having been already struck by the city when she first was on her way to the convent, knows that there's something here that she is feeling the call of. And so, and anyway, they say, anyway, your father, your boyfriend's father is going to show up and have him abducted anyway. So you might as well come with us. So she says, okay, I'll come with you. And she has an aria now, a perfect moment for an aria in an opera. And it's wonderfully complex. And it shows her, you know, Manon could easily be, I'm thinking of this now, Manon could easily be seen as an unsympathetic character, but she's not. And this aria is one of the places where we really understand her psychology. And so she decides, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Bretigny, and we get a stab in the orchestra. That's all. She says, okay, I'll go for his sake, for my boyfriend's sake, my poor chevalier. Oh, I love him, she says, but I still hesitate. No, no, she says, no, I'm not worthy of him. And then we get a tumultuous new theme, which expresses the tumult in her heart right now. And then it goes, and we get one of those diminished chords that we all know is kind of a stab of something, anxiety or something. She stops in her tracks and says, oh, I'm weak. I'm weak and I'm just fragile. Ah, if I could have stayed. Ah, and tears start falling. We hear the tears in the orchestra. So my left hand here is kind of sobs, and the right hand is the droplets of water. And now we realize, if we know the opera, that we're in the famous table aria. So she's in the room, and the orchestra lays down these sad minor chords. I'm going to paraphrase. Farewell to our little table that reunited us every day. Then we get a stab. Adieu. And then a little comfort, maybe. Sentimentality, nostalgia. Adieu, notre petite table. We don't know if we're sad or if we're wistful. goes back and forth between minor and major. Minor we tend to associate with sadness. Major we tend to associate with happiness. But when you blur the lines, that shift can be really poignant. And next week when we talk about Rusalka, you'll see some of that in Dvorak's music as well. Well, dramatic irony. Deslierres comes back from mailing his letter. We know Manon's going to leave. He has no idea. And he breaks our heart by telling Manon, oh, on the way back, Manon, I had a dream. And the orchestra circles around like this, upper strings in a high register, like comforting, like a lullaby. Up here, you know, dreams live somewhere up here. So the music is, the register is up here. It circles around because it's a dream that hasn't been fulfilled, perhaps. And the tenor sings a beautiful lyrical aria over it, the most tender declaration of a vision of a life in a small house in the woods somewhere, a modest life where only their love matters. And then he touchingly at the end says, but it's sad. The dream is sad because as I see the house, Manon's not there yet. And listen to what Massenet does. I just find that turn right there to be sublime and heartbreaking. Well, he gets abducted, and that's the end of that. She goes off. Le Bretigny becomes the toast of Paris. Everybody knows her. She's the finest dressed person around. And she has a scene in public where everybody recognizes her. And so she takes the moment to sing something. And it's, Massenet takes the moment. This is an aria called the gavotte, traditionally called the gavotte. It starts with a more like a slow minuet or a sarabande. And then we have a gavotte. And it's all about, let's answer the call of love now, because we won't always be young. Let's profit from our youth. But if you notice on the verse part of it versus the chorus, the verse is, again, of mixed emotions. And it starts with the strings playing pizzicato, I believe to sound like a lute. Here's the gavotte. Lots of Baroque style trills. Let's laugh. And guess what? A chorus of men, just like in Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend or Material Girl, answer her and sing the same thing she just did. But then she calms them all down and sings a second verse. It's a great, great show number, but really heartbreaking in its kind of bittersweet recognition of the fleetingness of time. And you also notice a lot of push and pull in the tempo that's necessary for Manon all the way through the opera. Well, poor Deslierres is heartbroken, and so he's decided to go become a priest, but he hasn't taken the vows yet, conveniently. But to introduce that scene in the Church of the Saint-Sulpice, we get some organ music off stage, coming from the stage, and then we get a little bit of a fugue, which is a church theme. So this is scene change music when you hear it. So here's the theme. Now, it's answered in another key and another voice. Etc., etc. Massenet imitating church music. Father shows up and says, look, son, come home, marry a good girl, have a family. But he can't forget Manon. And he sings another one of the highlight arias of the repertoire called Affluez douce image. Oh, please flee me, sweet image. And the main part of the aria is like this. notice kind of rich chords here, right? Stately. But over that, he has this pleading motive. It goes down the steps, but when it goes down, it has to go back up because he can't quite leave it. It's douce image. And then he almost desperately says, that's so dear to me. And then he has a complete kind of meltdown. Now he's exhausted. Loin-de-moi, far away from me, please. Well, it's not to be, because who walks in but Manon, who has heard that he's about to take the vows, and she intends to stop him. She hasn't been able to forget him either and still loves him. And so we know this music from before. It's the first music they had together. And she comes close to him and says, don't you remember? And she reaches through the gate and says, don't you recognize my hand touching your hand? Is it not my voice? The orchestra answers as an echo. She's waiting for him to answer, but he turns away. So the orchestra underscores the silence. Is it not for you? Now she talks about the caresses, just like before. Well, the poor man doesn't last long, but they go off and they're happy again. And they run off to a life of gambling and trying to make ends meet because his family is no longer going to fund him and they need to live. And she has expensive tastes. And he says, oh, Manon. There's an ensemble built around that. She also has another ensemble singing about the fleetingness of time and youth, and it's a really attractive quartet. It's for Manon and her three entourage ladies. It's just really irresistible, I find. Well, Father shows up, and we have, as we often do in grand opera and in the operas of Verdi, in the penultimate act, at the dramatic high point and turning point where everyone's fortunes change, an ensemble where everyone stands and reacts to the situation in a bit of shock. And it sounds like a little bit like this here. I'll play three measures. Comments like this. There's a similar scene in La Traviata and in many operas. So unfortunately, they've been accused of cheating at gambling and are arrested. That's the turning point. And Manon goes off to prison. Des Grieux gets out of prison because of his father's influence. And he and now the repentant cousin Lescaut try to free Manon from prison, and Lescaut bribes the guard to let her out for just a little bit of time so that she can see Des Grieux because she is sick and dying, having gotten sick in prison. And we get the most tender reunion, and it's a new theme. It's like a caress. He says, you're crying. Yes. I'm sad. Because I created such... So there's another elasticity here. There are a lot of shadings in one phrase. I'll play it again. In one phrase, it goes from having a long to becoming tender. And then they think, oh, maybe we can flee and everything will be great. And so they sing, there's a She sings, I feel a flame of hope, I'm getting better. And so the orchestra has this kind of tremolo of flame. And we have an aspirational motive. Oh, I feel. And not only do we have this flame here, this motive, those dots indicate some kind of resolve, right? Some kind of goal-oriented thinking. We're going to go somewhere and things are going to be fine. And we also even get one of these suspended fourth ornaments, which we know from church cadences, right? Amen cadences. You know, I think that's a subliminal message from Massenet that this is kind of, they feel that they're sanctifying something here. So, and then they join in together and sing that wonderful phrase. But then we got a stab of pain. Manon's not so well after all. She drops back to the ground. And we hear the very first music that brought them together, the perfume theme. So it's goodbye, the ultimate, she says. And sorry, spoiler alert, it is opera. I know you all know where this is going if you haven't seen it before. She falters, and she says, no, it must be, it must be. And from before, the saraband motive that was originally self-pity and said, well, thus ended the story, Manon, let's go. And that's the story, and she says, of Manon, and it says, parler, spoken at the end, let's go. And then it's the conductor's job to time that silence and bring the orchestra in with a crash. Sometimes I like to play games when preparing a score of making it sound a little different to kind of freshen the perspective. And I imagine if this were happy end opera, that same music would sound like this. You know, there's this, that little half step there, we know that's pain. But it could be. But it's not to be. Well, this is only a very, very brief tour of some things to listen for in Manon. It's a wonderful score. I remember conducting it at Des Moines. It was the first time I'd done this piece. I'd done Werther decades before. It's one of the dearest experiences I had professionally. Manon rivals that. Conducting Manon, apart from the verismo scenes that are meaty, I find conducting Manon is like being surrounded by jillions of stunning butterflies, and you have to catch them and hold them and present them for just the right amount of time before you release them, and then you have to catch the next one. And I can do that, and those beautiful butterflies are all the people I get to collaborate on this production. You know, Christine McIntyre, we've collaborated on more than 10 productions now. She is one of the most thoughtful and inspiring directors I know of to work with. The whole design team did a beautiful job. It's stunning. The costumes are stunning. The cast was an absolute dream. In preparing for this, I have had so many fond memories come back. And you were all so not just musical virtuosos of your vocal technique, but technique in service of telling stories earnestly and beautifully and making us in the audience, or even those kind of observing from the pit as much as possible, enthralled with what you're doing. And the fabulous Des Moines Metro Opera Festival Orchestra, made up of musicians in leading positions in other orchestras around the country during the year, they all unbelievably come to us for 5 weeks in the summer and make music out of sheer joy of playing opera. And they played with all the beauty and sensitivity you could imagine, and that's so key for realizing this score. It's one of the great, beautiful scores of all time. And now, on Sunday, I finally get to hear it from the audience. I really look forward to that. I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. I have to say it's a little unnerving talking to you at a camera. I'm used to having an audience. Like I was saying before, we miss our audience. We can react off of you. But anyway, this has been fun. Please tune in tomorrow evening for Christine McIntyre's discussion of Manon. It will be very informative. There's a catching up with the cast where you can hear from the singers on Friday. And not in the production, however, in numerous other productions with us, and a legend in the opera world, Joyce Castle, will be doing an at-home recital on Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. Central. Please do not miss that. It will be a recital unlike anything you have seen. And then our wonderful Joshua Borths does our opera previews, and he will be doing a preview on Sunday, 45 minutes before the beginning of the broadcast at 2. You can join us for the watch party again. And you can also watch again or watch later over the following 45 days. At this time next week, I will have one of these sessions on the topic of Dvorak's Rusalka as a cornerstone of the Czech national revival and folk narrative. I will play us out today with one more work by the master François Couperin from the same keyboard cycle from before. This is a sprightly and graceful number, slightly impetuous, appropriately called Manon. Thank you. Hopefully see you Sunday.